The Looking Glass, the second adventure of Alice, mirrors Wonderland chapter by chapter. The first chapter of each of Alice's adventures is about passion with the White Rabbit and the Black Kitten. The second chapter is about action with the Swimming Mouse and the Running Red Queen. The third chapter is about state with the Dodo's Caucus Race, which runs around in a circle, and the Gnat on the public train, which goes in a line. The fourth chapter is about position, with Alice taking a position in the White Rabbit's house and between Tweedledum and Dee while she's in the Red King's dream. The fifth and sixth chapters of each work are about time, space, and relations interwoven and mixed together, such that the fifth chapter of each book is about time with the Caterpillar of Wonderland and the White Queen of the Looking Glass. The sixth chapter is about relations with the Duchess and Humpty Dumpty, who are both poor in relations, and space. The Cheshire Cat and the White Sheep does not have its own chapter. Its own space is space itself. The seventh chapter of each work is about quality, with the underqualified Rude Mad Tea Party and the overperforming Lion and Unicorn, and with the Hatter and Hare of poor character and quality in both, but opposite, because they're underacting and underperforming in the first and overperforming and overacting with Anglo-Saxon odd attitudes. The eighth chapter is about quantity, with the playing cards of the Queen of Hearts and the endless inventions of the White Knight, an innumerable quantity as opposed to the cards. The remaining chapters of each work are about substance, or its absence, with the insubstantial lies of the Mock Turtle leading to the King of Hearts trial over the stolen but recovered tarts, and the Queen's testing Alice in unnumbered sums leading to the Banquet is absence. They turn into the food, and the food turns into them somewhat. In the opening chapter of Looking Glass, the Black Kitten attacks the yarn with passion. Alice threatens and kisses her passionately, and we learn she threatened her nurse as if she was a hyena. The White Queen rushes to her screaming baby, so passionate she knocks over the king. Alice laughs at the king's frozen horror and moves the pen of the king as if she is the passion or genius that directs him. And we hear of the dreaded Jabberwock, this sort of unknown horror. In the next chapter, Alice finds a backwards acting corkscrew path, and action is much like the shape of a corkscrew, circling while pushing forward. It's a circle if you look through the center of it, and it's linear if you look across its length. A corkscrew is used forwards and backwards, otherwise it's stuck. The corkscrew path keeps turning Alice back, but she pushes on to flowers that can't move or act as Alice can. They are stuck. So they criticize her for being different. Even the tiger lily, who sides with her, can't get at the posies, and they know that, which is why they talk. They say the tree will act for them if there's danger barking, but trees don't bark, and so it wouldn't act. It can't. Just as they can't. The Red Queen contradicts and corrects Alice continuously, criticizing everything Alice does, and Alice sees they are all playing chess, which shows her her future course of action out before her. The moment the Queen tells Alice she will be a queen herself if she acts across the board, when she reaches the end, they both begin running hand in hand. They run as fast as they can to stay in place, with biscuits that make matters worse, action leading to passion, not satisfaction in a settled state. In the next chapter, the state is reflected by the train, which moves in a line rather than in a circle like the caucus race, although both are quite useless and foolish. The passengers talk together with slogans like the public mind. An insect who tells jokes Alice ignores shows her the rich dragonfly, who is made of plum pudding and brandy, and the poor bread and butter fly, who always fails to find enough and dies. Names are like titles like the state, and that is what they live on or don't. As the gnat sighs himself away, Alice goes from sad puns, double-meaning words, to blissfully losing her name in the woods with a fawn and both forgetting their position. In the next chapter, Alice meets the Tweedles, who offer her opposed positions in logic, contrary-wise, and tell her the longest story of the Walrus and Carpenter misleading and eating young oysters to keep her out in the woods with them. In On Interpretation, Aristotle says, if such things may be or may not be, events may take place or may not. This is much like saying if it was so, it might be, and if it were so, it would be, but as it isn't, it ain't, and that's logic. Alice calls them first boy and next boy. First most in the class and the second most in the class used to be put in the first and second most seat. Dumb says she should begin by shaking hands as if equals. He says, how do you do, which is lower class. The brothers hug each other as equals, and Alice finds herself dancing round and round foolishly with them all holding hands, with music coming from under a tree. As the Walrus and Carpenter opens, the sun is in the moon's position, the middle of the night. The Walrus is upper class, and the Carpenter is lower class, with a paper workman's hat. The oysters do not listen to their elder, in senior position and wiser. They stop at a rock conveniently low in position, so the oysters can join them and then get eaten. The Walrus begins with talk of lowly things, but also then highly kings. The oysters ask not to be eaten, and the walrus asks if they admire the view, distraction with position. Alice hears the Red King snoring, and they tell her that she is only a thing in his dream, which is equally and oppositely the case, as he is a thing in her dream, consuming her like bats eat cats, like walrus eat oysters, and she is dreaming of him, each eclipsing the position of the other equally round and round. Dumb puts a saucepan on his head. It's now a helmet by position. Alice asks if it is going to rain. Dumb spreads a large umbrella and says it will not rain under it, and they don't care if it rains outside the umbrella, outside that position. The umbrella is as sharp as a sword. Alice laughs, but it is at the tip. They agree to have a battle over a broken rattle, which like a corkscrew works by moving backwards and forwards. The battle is interrupted, not resolved, by the black crow, which sends both brothers equally fleeing in fright. In the prior analytics, Aristotle says if A stands for crows and B for intelligent, then no A applies to B and vice versa. In the next chapter, the White Queen remembers whatever happens both ways in time, acts like a child, says her shawl is out of temper, and doesn't see a problem with jam days other than today. The Latin pun on iam is about now in the future and past tenses, some claim, and I believe them, which would make sense with time and tenses. Alice tells her she is 7.5 exactly, and the Queen tells Alice she is 101 years, 5 months and a day old, which Alice says she cannot believe, and the White Queen tells Alice to take a breath, shut her eyes, and try again, but this is silly as taking more time to believe won't help. Alice says she can't believe in impossible things, and the Queen says she simply needs practice, as she sometimes believed 6 impossible things before breakfast. She tells Alice to consider how she's grown over her life, how long she's come this day, and what time it is right now to distract herself, as nobody can do 2 things at the same time. She runs ahead of Alice into the next space, and as Alice joins her, the White Queen turns into the sheep, and the themes of time turn into space, knitting something out of herself, spatially, and says Alice can look this way or that, but can't look all around herself at once. Suddenly she sounds like the Cheshire Cat. Time turns into space in the same chapter. Alice says she doesn't know what she wants, and so will look all around the shop, searching the space. In the sheep's shop, things flow about spatially so, such that when Alice tries to grasp a bright thing that looks sometimes like a doll, and sometimes like an old workbox, which would be a toy with serious compartments and categories. These stories have serious categories in them. So it keeps sliding away out of its place, and then the space of the shop turns into an outdoor river. Indoor turns into outdoor. Space of one kind turns into opposite space altogether, flowing about so, and the grass and the rushes are always greener, idealizing where we are not, whatever is where we can't reach. The sheep is knitting with 14 pairs of knitting needles. Those would be 2 ideas, the 2 primary ideas, the primary idea of the first book of Aristotle's logic, the categories, and the primary idea of the second book on interpretation, the 2 ideas you could teach a child, with examples illustrated. The 10 categories and the 4 forms of proposition is the 14 pairs of knitting needles. She can't put things in people's hands herself. She doesn't place anything in people's hands because she's place itself. So the egg, which will turn into Humpty Dumpty, recedes as she walks towards it spatially, as Humpty will into his own position, thus bad relations. They do not leave the shop of place and don't leave place, but rather the shop as before turns into the outside. In the next chapter, Humpty Dumpty, like the Duchess, is essentially terrible at relations. He is even unaware he's an egg. He perches dangerously expecting all the king's men to save him if he fails, treats conversation like a competitive game, and thinks words mean only what he says they mean. He orders fish to do as he wishes, doesn't listen to them, and moves to kill them with a corkscrew in hand. Acting. He leaves his action hanging. Like him without further development, he suddenly says goodbye, presuming to end the conversation whenever he likes. Alice tries to be cheerful and saying goodbye until they meet again, and he gives her only 1 finger to shake. Upper class folks gave people occasionally 2 fingers to shake, and says he would not recognize her as she is exactly so much like other people. He shuts his eyes and says no more. As Alice leaves, she says to herself, of all the unsatisfactory people I've ever met, similar to the words she says at the end of the Tea Party, but this time it is just before the chapter with Hare and Hatter. So in the next chapter, the White King sends his horses and men, an act of noble and caring quality. He praises Alice's eyes when she says she sees nobody on the road. Unlike the Tea Party, his messengers Haga and Hatta overextend themselves for others and overact with Anglo-Saxon attitudes. Unlike Wonderland, where the hare offered wine and had none, the king asks for a ham sandwich and has it immediately. The king eats hay, saying there's nothing like it, not that it's good, of good quality. Hatta overeats, and the lion and unicorn overfight, knocking each other over 87 times each. That's way too much. They see the White Queen running by, and the king says you can't stop her, you can't stop time, and all the battles running. The unicorn and Alice agree to believe in each other, and they all share pear plum pudding, which overacts in dividing itself up for others, which is incredible. In the next chapter, the White Knight produces an endless quantity of useless ideas, wears an upside-down box on his back such that everything falls out like a jar without marmalade or an ideal category or quantity. He has a hive with no bees and a mousetrap with problems with mice, and he constantly falls off his horse. His cleverest idea is a pudding that has never been cooked, so the proof isn't in the pudding, and it's an abstract idea that doesn't have substance. While the queens test Alice in sums in the following chapter, neither they nor the White Knight use numerical quantities, but rather overabundance in substances, and then they do sums and substances. So in the next chapter, Alice finds a golden crown on her head as balance of gold between the red and white queen, finds herself doing those sums, dividing bread with a knife and taking a bone from a dog. You actually get slices from bread, not a specific quantity unless that's what you're going for. The answer would not be a quantity, it would be slices. So the banquet and dream end with the guests and food trading places, and Alice shakes the dream queen into the real kitten.